I want to start with a little story of something that happened for me this week, where I really found a new understanding of forgiveness. This week was a, uh, a an emotional whirlwind for me. I had for You all know that I have a sleep podcast called Listen to Sleep. And for the last couple of years, there have been a lot of new sleep podcasts. And what started out as a pretty successful podcast kind of like dropped off to about half of what it had been. And I was okay with that. It wasn't like if you'd asked me what my preference was, I probably would have said, "Oh, I would like it if it had like been more successful." But I loved the fact that the people who loved it, and that it helps thousands of people fall asleep every night. Well, 2 weeks ago, I made a video on Instagram about a story on the podcast that went kind of viral, like about a 500,000 views. And that started getting more people listening to the podcast. And then last week, I had another video about a story on the podcast that went over 1 million videos, or over 1 million views. And it shot the podcast up into like the top 10 in countries all over the world. And when that happened, I noticed that the reaction in my body was the exact same as when it had first died down. That it was like this anxiety, and it, like I've talked about before, that shame, that unworthiness, that sense of not being deserving of success or able to be successful. It was exactly the same in when things were expressing in the outside world successfully as when they weren't. And I found myself like going, what is this? At first, I was just kind of like, oh my God, you're a mess. And then I said, no, what is this? You know, I let myself get really curious about it. And I saw that it's the story, it's everything that comes after the reaction that makes the difference, that starts to build a whole world of illusion or goes deeper into the unknown. And that in that discomfort, in that anxiety, in that shame, that those feelings of unworthiness, there was this tendency to want to build a story. And forgiveness is a way to start building, to take that storytelling mechanism and almost turn it back on itself, to allow us to forgive ourselves or others, is really a reframing of our story. And it's like the first step we can take towards experiencing compassion, where compassion is that deep sense of we're all in this together. And so for me, it was about kind of forgiving myself for this reaction, and for that, still that place in me, that in my shadow, or whatever you want to call it, that was still feeling that reaction. It was real in that moment. But then to see that it only ever needed to be that everything that came after that, every part of the story about why that was, or what that was, or even healing it or changing it or anything, nothing needed to change. Nothing was broken. It was simply just there. And forgiveness is a way that we can actively go, oh, I see the reaction and I see that there wants to be a story here. So let's tell one. Let's tell a story of kindness. Let's tell a story of connection. Let's tell a story of wholeness, of belonging, of forgiveness. So today is about forgiveness. And we'll start like we usually do with a meditation. So if you can settle into your seat, take a few deep breaths. And if you feel comfortable, go ahead and close your eyes. Otherwise, just feel free to gaze down towards the floor in front of you. Just sensing into the body, feeling the weight of gravity holding you down on whatever it is that's holding you up. And in this meditation, we're going to bring our awareness to the sensations in the body. Let's just start with bringing to mind any resentment or hurt that may have recently been in your awareness. Anything that you might want to forgive in yourself or in someone else. And if nothing comes to mind, that's okay. But if something does, see if you can get curious about where that expresses itself in the sensations in the body. Is there a tension somewhere? A buzzing, a warmth, coolness, tingling, a numbness? Is there anywhere in the body where that resentment seems to reside, where that hurt seems to reside? You may even feel like an anxiety or a fear. For me, it's right in the pit of my stomach. For you, it may be somewhere else. Chest, forehead, the neck, belly. Let's just start at the top of our head and sense in to what the top of our head feels like. What sensations are in the top of your head? and moving down into the face and the back of the head. And the neck, sensing into the back of the neck and the front of the neck. And remembering to breathe. Sensing into the shoulders, and the upper arms, lower arms, the hands. What do you feel in the hands? And sensing into the chest and the upper back, lower back, and the belly. Sensing into the pelvis, our upper legs, our knees, and our lower legs. And finally, sensing into the feet and our connection to the world below us. And as we survey our experience of the senses, might notice that some places feel almost equanimous, a sense of equanimity, no tension, just fine. And others might feel differently. What happens when we just let go of the story of how things feel? What feelings mean? What sensations mean? What if we just get curious about the sensations and simply allow them to be what they are? And from this place of allowing, let's go back to any sensation of discomfort. And let's bring a story of forgiveness to that discomfort. Let's bring a story of who we are right now in this moment, the totality of who we are, acknowledging that discomfort, acknowledging that we, as well as everyone else, are doing the best they can with the conditions in their lives. We are doing the best we can with the conditions in our lives. And forgiveness is telling that story. Forgiveness is consciously saying, I yield to compassion, to a knowing that we are all in this together. Rather than yielding to doubt, resentment, anger. We actively yield to compassion through the story of forgiveness. And it's a story that comes from this moment, from this experience of wholeness. Mm. When you're ready, wiggle your fingers and toes. Take a few deep breaths. And if you closed your eyes, open them. So much of the hero's journey is about seeing the story now, letting go of the story of the past and the future, and living and telling the story of the unknown all at once. And one of the best examples of this, of what I would call really useful storytelling, of, of the way we transform our own personal myth, the story of who we are, where we're going, what it all means to us, is telling that story of the now, like we tell through poetry, art, song. Forgiveness is that same thing. It is the creation of a story of now that brings the whole of experience together in a way where we're not pulling one piece out of the past, where we're not focusing on how things could have been different. Because ultimately, they couldn't have, or they would have, but they weren't. And in that yielding to the unknown, to the story of now, to the acceptance of the fullness of what forgiveness means, the living realization of compassion that we are all in this together. That the separation that we create through resentment, through seeing our own sensations as bad, something that needs to change, or something that's broken. We're just creating more separation in our lives. And ultimately, more separation, more suffering. They go hand in hand. And unfortunately, that most of us are brought up to think that if we can get even more separation, we can finally get to the place where we will have it all dialed in. It becomes this almost like a manic, I know for me it was for many years, this manic attempt to categorize and put everything in a box and, explain this thing in the past and what I need in the future and blah, 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 blah. Exhausting. In an attempt to define who we are. And there's nothing wrong with that. But it is where all of our suffering is coming from. And when we come to pain, to discomfort, to shame, to anxiety, with forgiveness, with this moment, with the tenderness of all of our humanity, we get a chance to see through those illusions and to experience who we are right now, in this moment, alive, in a completely different way. A way that's much closer to the truth. And we know it through our experience. We go, oh, yeah. And words fail. So we make art and we sing songs and we write poems. And someone sees that art, hears that song, reads that poem, and the thing that was between the words, the thing that was between the lines is what's communicated. And that is our humanity. That is forgiveness. That is what it means to be human. And not just human, conscious, this little thing right here. She has none of the mechanisms and apparatus that we use to beat ourselves up. You want a Zen master in your life? Get a cat or a dog. They are complete and utter innocence, complete connection to the senses, without any of the doubt, without any of the thinking, without any of the self. She has no self. And when when we look into our pets' eyes, when we just let them sit on our lap in a way that would make us feel uncomfortable if like our best friend wanted to do it, we connect with that own innocence in ourselves. But we tell a story of, oh yeah, it's a cat, it's a dog, it's it's something without all of the things that we use to beat ourselves up. That habit, because we just never stopped. Forgiveness is a way to start to stop. So the forgiveness challenge is about that. It's about reframing our stories, reconnecting with our innocence, our humanity, and actively expressing compassion for ourselves and others. It's something we can do and be at the same time. And I found it to be so useful in my own life, in my own understanding of who I am, my own hero's journey. And I can't wait to hear from you how it shows up in your hero's journey and what difference, if any, it makes. So let me know.